registered. How many of you own a tablet of any kind? Let's count the hands. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. All right. Of those 18, how many of you own an Apple tablet? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
50%. Apple had
So
75%.
in this nonconformist group, that must then be 10 non-Apple tablets. So let's ask that question, just to make sure it adds up to 18. How many of you own a non-Apple tablet?
Some could own both.
That's true, you're quite right. But 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. So there is a little bit.
What if we own more than one tablet?
I think Eric has
There
both.
you go.
Don't you have both? Yeah,
Um,
Eric has both. Apple and
That's. I mean, I have both. I've got an Android and. How many of you own a smartphone that can run apps like calculators?
Better ask who doesn't.
Since there's so many hands up, we'll subtract from 41. Put your hands down. Oh, raise your hand if you're still using a rotary mobile phone. How many of you don't have a smartphone of any kind? 2.
Semi-smart.
Semi-smart. The user's smart, but 2, 4, 6, 8,
And over there too. Jackie's
10,
taking a-
12, 14, 16, really? 17. So
It was a
17
gift,
and what,
so I
24?
have to.
There are not
Business.
41 people in the room.
There's somebody, Gene, don't forget the touch.
Well, that's true too. Well, we'll keep it with phones because then I got to worry about the rest. But you're quite right because you can run apps on other things.
Not everyone who is registered is in the room, so your subtraction doesn't mean very much.
Your 41 assumption
It's
is.
I'm with engineers. It's approximate.
Rounded to
Good enough.
I tried to think of, for this topic, which Richard and I have been thinking about for some time, tried to think of some appropriate opening quotes. I thought of one from Julius Caesar. I come not to praise calculators, but to bury them. I thought of Star Trek, The Undiscovered Country. Calculators have 25 years to live, or whatever. It was Klingon Empire at the time. I really have become convinced myself, as much as it pains me to suggest, that outside of several limited areas of application, I believe physical calculators with individual keys for a specific purpose are rapidly heading the way of the dinosaur or the dodo. They're just, it's incredible the change that even I have noticed as an enthusiast, and my feelings and thoughts toward what's going to happen, as we're going to try to talk about hopefully here with the presentation. And if I can get the tablet to focus on this, I may have to use my smartphone here to do it. We're talking about convergence. All of these different things over here, I believe, are rapidly converging into either smartphones or tablets. Think of the GPS market. Why do you want a specific GPS? Truly, if you already have a smartphone, as most people seem to be getting these days. Think of the digital video camera. You can buy an enormously complex HD camcorder for $100 now because everybody seems to be doing their video with one of these that can do 1080p recording. All these different devices are really rapidly being superseded by the tablet and smartphone market. When you think of HP's current products, looking at their webpage, and Richard Ballmeans, since you put this together, Bob, feel free to jump right on in as well at different points. You know, they have all sorts of financial calculators, scientific and graphing calculators, home and office products, but these are the ones I am proposing are headed toward, what's the other phrase, the ash heap of history very, very soon. And again, don't take me wrong. I'm not up here going, yay, they're headed to the ash heap of history. No, it's a sad thing. I'm coming to the conclusion. Calculator features that we all know and love, key per function. You know, when if you have a handheld computer, think the 71 or the 75, it fails this somewhat. Richard's test was always, how do you take the sign of a number? Do you type SIN, or do you push a key that can execute the actual function for SIN? Now, you can do key assignments on some of those, but that was kind of the difference between a calculator versus using a computer in many ways. Low cost, I mean, you're not going to have a $500 calculator today. Convenient, they're handheld, they're always with you, always work. Typically now, that's also smartphone. Usually works, handheld, and most of the time with you, perhaps more often than a calculator is. Easy to use. Calculators, one of the features they have, and the reason they haven't gone extinct, I really think already, is the complying with the testing organizations. They don't want you to be using a phone or a tablet to take the tests, because there's connectivity aspect of it.
Ask the audience.
Oh, you ask them. Go ahead.
Okay, why don't they allow that?
They're in.
Wait, I know you know.
Cheating.
But
I've heard it over here, cheating.
yeah, they don't want you to take the exam home with you and then sell it, make a few bucks, and then other people can learn about the exam. That's the primary reason, but it's really stupid, because with technology today, you would have every answer of every question unique to the person who took the test, if you manage that properly.
Actually, taking the test home, I think, is not an issue, because the FAA, Federal Aviation Authority, by law, have to release all their questions and answers. And they give you a booklet, 500, 900, 1,000 questions and answers, and they give you an answer key that is randomly generated.
It may very well be for the FAA.
I think that's the exception than the rule.
In terms of the ACT, the SAT, the engineering and surveying applications, the MCAT,
Yeah,
things like that.
Let me carry the thought, just one second. The thing is, if the government can do it, then so can others. That's not a problem.
Yep.
The REA has those nice thick books. Schaum Outline has those nice big books. Essentially questions and answers. The problem is the cheating. It used to be a story way back when one guy pretended to have a toothache, and he actually had a little transmitter, and he would transmit to his buddies at the frat, and they would have 10 guys in a cluster answering questions for him or recording the answer. And I think that's the real issue in this case.
it is cheating. It really is
It's
cheating.
It's not
Yes, ma'am.
the least.
What I was noticing actually as a substitute teacher at the high school level, the big issue there is most of the kids have phones, and they said, okay, you're not supposed to have them in class, but the parents actually lobbied that they wanted to be able to get in touch with their kids if there was an emergency. So the big problem now is when the kid has a test, he's texting a buddy who already had this test in another room.
Yes. It's again,
You know?
cheating. The technology is enabling cheating. And so that's the basic issue. And how are you going to know if you really know it? Or just you're putting down an answer that somebody else told you the answer was. And that's why these are typically approved by schools for students, even if the student has a phone or a tablet.
We're just copying neighbors. That's what I've seen most of.
And copying, it's an electronic version of copying the
Pencil and
neighbor.
paper, version, yeah.
No matter how many seats you put between the students,
For the virtual
They could be in
neighbor.
another room.
texting is
Neighbor.
you know,
They had the
next door neighbor.
IR link or something like that, or Bluetooth.
And of course, a few years ago, Apple introduced the iPad. I think most of you know about it. If not, you ought to go to a store, look at one, or Google it. I'm just kidding. Very, very thin, light. It's taken off an incredible amount. I mean, the company I work for has seen tablets just overwhelming the sales of everything else. We started as an MP3 accessory company for the iPod music player.
Yeah.
They still sell some of those, but that is rapidly gone toward that ash heap of history, it appears. And then you had the smartphones, and now the tablets are really, really eclipsing most everything else. Apple's been a big push for that, because there have been, let's face it, there have been some tablet computers before the iPad, but they never came up with any kind of the sales numbers that Apple has been able to generate with the iPad. The nearest competitors to the iPad are, as a single brand, probably the Kindle. I imagine the Kindle's second. And then you have various makers of tablets that run the Android operating system, but those are kind of fragmented. I think that may be the biggest challenge to the Android tablet market is the fragmentation. The Kindle and Amazon seem to be perhaps the biggest single competitor to the iPad.
The deal with the Apple iOS is that it also works on the PC, and you can, there are applets on the Apple that you can use to run Microsoft Office programs, and you may not always want to like I use my computer to generate what I want to use, and then I put it onto my iPad, and it works very well that way.
And anything that runs across the iOS environment can run on your phone or your iPod Touch or something like that. And of course, you either have Wi-Fi connectivity if it's or cellular. You can actually get cellular connectivity on the iPads.
Pay for it.
There he is. He's one of the favorite people at the company I work for, and also one of the most infuriating. But 8 to 4 million a year for the iPad, 84 million sold Wikipedia. I mean, it's the iPad 1, the iPad 2, the iPad 3. And you can see, supposedly they've got anywhere from 60 to 75% of the market of tablet sales. And I still remember the reviews the first couple of days where, nobody will ever want this thing. And it's if you had bought, I think I read, if you had bought Apple stock at the time of the market crash 4 years ago, it was under $100 a share, and it closed over $700 this week. And there's a reason for that. It's because of the incredible growth that they've had in sales of all sorts of devices. But it's not really, I mean, the iPad may be the dominant player, but it's tablets, right? And I've got now finally an Android tablet myself. So tablets are what I think are the problem from a calculator perspective. Different iPad versions, the original, the iPad 2 that was thinner, faster, the iPad 3 with this Retina display, they call it. If you've ever been able to see the iPad 1 or 2 versus the one with the high density display, the ability to read text is so much more, it's so much easier on the newest. I gave 2 of them to Richard, said here's one and here's the other, which one's the good display? And he was able to actually read the text on this one because it was just so clear. There's a speculation of a smaller iPad mini, a la the Kindle Fire size, maybe a 7 or 8 inch. That's what the press seems to suggest. Not sure when. And to me, that's what the iPad's turning into. How many people know what that is? That's right. Space Odyssey? No, that would be Hal. Good morning, Amir. In the Star Trek Next Generation, they were always wandering around with the tiny little tablets. Maybe they were the mini size, right? The 7-inch tablets. And they always had something on here, right? LCARs, whatever. And so now you can actually have an app that will do all kind of noise and lights and buttons, just like Captain Picard probably was looking at as he was walking around. Why is it so popular? Richard and I were thinking about it. Applications, applications, and applications. There are over 100,000 apps as of last year, even on the iTunes App Store. Many of those are very similar. I mean, there are dozens of apps that will tell you when Easter is. They're all counted in that 100,000. I mean, how many of those do you really need, right? Just one, perhaps, if you're even interested in when Easter is and don't have a calendar on the wall. But there are just all sorts of apps. Here recently, just in this last week, a good friend of mine that is suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, actually had an app published on the App Store. He coded it first in Microsoft Excel and then farmed it out to someone. But he did it all by moving his head with his glasses that were doing a virtual keyboard on his PC. So you can get into the App Store with a little bit of effort. Richard had said newer versions bring prices down. That's only on the old versions. Apple has been,
yeah, but I mean,
but still, it's not very much down. The iPad 2 is still selling for $399.
And Apple doesn't get a lot of discounting, but the market forces do come to work, and as technology advances, the prices do come down.
The Apple has been remarkably resistant to price erosion, and that's incredible.
As HP calculators in the past. Yeah.
True, but in this case, the iPad unit volume has continued to skyrocket, even with those high prices. That's the difference, I think. I would love to have them down $100, $150. I mean, it'd be fabulous, but it just doesn't seem that way. So there's a lot of reasons. It's fairly lightweight, nice big display. The interface is easy to learn. And again, we may not be as into it, although many of us, whatever the math actually works out to be, close to, right, these percentages up here, already have tablets. Younger people are even higher adoption rates. I mean, all the little kids that I know already have either, they have a touch, and the girls at least, I don't see the guys doing this, but the young girls are putting cases on them differently every day as a style statement. And they swap it. It's like, look, I've got the pink and blue one today, you know, and that kind of stuff. So it's becoming part of who they are and how they interact with other people. And as you go to college, many colleges are handing these out. My daughter started as a freshman this year, and part of what she was given was an iPad 3. And many of her textbooks are digital form. So instead of paying $200 for a human anatomy and physiology textbook, she can get the PDF essentially for $25. So the textbook industry is also doomed, I really think. The competition, these are the other individuals. You've got some Galaxy tablets, the different Kindle tablets. I find it interesting, Amazon is starting to have problems with Kindles. How many of you noticed a news item this week about the Kindle?
Yeah, the Kindle Fire.
I heard it. Walmart. Walmart's no longer selling the Kindle. They're following Target from a couple of months ago. Why? Why are Walmart and Target not selling the Kindles anymore?
Amazon store.
Why the Amazon store?
Competition.
But what's the competition?
No bricks and mortar.
Well, but how? Why is Target
Price.
upset with Amazon? What are people doing?
Tax, the sales tax.
I'm interested in a new toaster. I go into Target. Oh, look at that. $39.99 for a toaster. I take my smartphone, I scan the UPC, and it automatically tells me it's available for $6 on the Amazon store with free next day shipping. So I said, great, order it right there and go to the next aisle. Target and Walmart are really upset because they are becoming the showroom for Amazon. And so if Amazon's going to do that, Target and Walmart aren't going to sell any of their stuff. You know, we'll make our money elsewhere. There was also an article about Amazon wanting to, as they continue to expand their distribution system, starting to promise in many localities same-day delivery. You order something at 10 a.m. and it can be at your house by the time you get home for dinner.
They were talking about lockers, having lockers located in certain locations with you could unlock them with your smartphone, go in there. So when you, instead of delivering to your house, they would deliver to the central location. You go to this location, put your smartphone up there, click on it, and it releases the locker which has your package in it.
That was another variation of it. I mean, it's like we've all thought about. I call up the grocery store. We send over a pound of ham and something else, right? And then it comes over an hour later on the back of somebody's bicycle. Amazon is striving, from this article, to do just that. 5 years from now, Amazon is going to be incredible. They may be the ones we all are worrying about instead of Apple trying to take things over.
Stock.
Maybe not a bad idea. Other ones, I mean, all the Kindles, the new Kindles, the Kindle Fire HDs. If you haven't seen the reviews of the new Kindles that were released in the last month, I was amazed at what they were able to pack in these things for a couple of $100s. All of these have access to any of the music and the books in the Amazon store. And so all of their music and movies and things like that are directly tied to that device. That's why they, in my opinion, are the big competitor to Apple. But the good news from a tablet perspective is more tablets everywhere. Microsoft's got a item coming out, the Surface. We'll see if they finally, have the cylinders all going in the appropriate directions. They've kind of misfired a good bit recently, it seems to me. What are the problems with some of these other competitors? Well, they're not Apple products. What's the advantage of some of these products? They are not Apple products. Android as a competitor is doing well because it's not locked down. There are a lot of things I'd love to try to do on this iPad. Can't do it. Apple won't let me.
So guarantee it working.
There are reasons they do that, but hey, I'm smart. I'll figure it out for myself. I want to be able to do it. So that's the pro and con. It all depends on how you view these things. Tablets used in schools, Apple iBooks, that's an app where you can have bookshelves and things like that, or the textbooks are kept current. You can make annotations in them, you can highlight in them, and it stays there. I mean, it's really nice, and it's a whole lot cheaper to buy the books this way. All these different things. I don't know about you, but I have held my daughter's backpack. I don't know how she carries it around. It's incredible how heavy it is with the book, huge book in there for calculus and chemistry and all these different things. iPad, very, very light and has all the books on it. You got internet connections, I mean, all these different reasons, right? There are reasons why these things are taking over in the schools. I don't think we have a slide for it, but businesses are rapidly deploying these tablets too. You've got, the cable, internet and TV providers with the people in their trucks. They've got the apps all in there. Hospitals. We've had lots of airport personnel out on the tarmacs, and that's one reason why this type of case, there's an iPad in this thing, and some of you have held this thing already. It adds a lot of weight to the device, but this case is called the Survivor, and it's for a reason. Because if you drop that iPad on any hard surface, odds are it's going to break. And in these, typically the salesperson, when they show this, this is a Griffin pitch, sorry, my company. They typically, when they're meeting with the client, take it and throw it against the wall and go pick it up and say, now, you want to try that with one outside of our case?
Oh, I don't believe that'll work. I want to see that right now.
Since this is my iPad and not the company iPad, I'm not going to do that. But we had some videos where we were showing those same cases for the phones, and the videos, it was just very humorous to me. They were taking the phones and throwing them as hard as they could against the wall, and it got stuck in the drywall. And they had to yank it out. The phone's still working fine. They were driving down the street with the video going through the phone out of the window. The phone camera was recording video, so you see it tumbling on the, and it picks it up and it works. Now occasionally the things die. This is not foolproof, but they would die a whole lot faster if they weren't in these kind of protective cases. And so that's one of the benefits we have had with the deployment of these tablets. A lot of the ecosystem of providing accessories for it has really been riding high. So it's very exciting from our standpoint, because the more of these they sell, the more fun I get to have playing with things. You've got calculators simply being displaced in terms of the physical ones, because you've got emulators running on the tablets. On my phone, I don't have all these emulators that are available, but I've got an HP 42 emulator, very easy to use, the 12C, 11C, 15, and 16, an HP 25 one I downloaded for free yesterday, several other variations of the 12C, kind of a reason I have a lot of those, I guess. 2 versions of the 48, an HP 70, I mean, they're there. And they are just as easy to use, in my opinion, as one that has the nice firm clicky buttons. That's the only thing yet they really don't do. On an iPad in particular, the keys are so nice and large that when you press them, you can tell it made contact because the background of the key will flash white. So you get that feedback. Jake has been talking for several years about kind of haptic technology where it'll kind of buzz or give you some tactile feedback. Maybe that'll come. It depends on whether one of those competitors or Apple decides to adopt it, but they're fairly easy to use. I mean, I showed Richard last night, we were looking at the HP 70 emulator on here, and I said, all right, let's just do a house payment. So I said, all right, 360 in, and boom, 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 it was done. Didn't miss any keystrokes. It was right here. I said, all right, now let's do Google Earth. I hit a button and I started flying over my house. Can't do that on my HP. So it was all on this one little device, and I really think, I told him, I looked over and I said, calculators are dead. And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. So the question is, how we can make the most of it. Enjoy our toys now may be one response to it. And so I would suggest that HP really needs to respond. They're not stupid. They really aren't. Tim's a very smart guy over there. He really is. They know these things just as well as we do. In fact, they've had experience with certain tablets. The response they need to make is not by simply coming out with an HP TouchPad 2. Remember they dumped those for $99 for the 16 gig or $150 for the 32. But they must be thinking about what to do in this kind of a direction of convergence, our theme for the conference. And so we want to encourage them of course, to keep making our little toys with the actual buttons, but to find ways to respond, to stay on track, make money however they can, and maybe we'll get some of our other toys. Think about digital photography and Kodak. You know, I know Volodic's still keeping them in business of some sort by buying film. He's got one back there. But I'm sorry, you just don't have billions of dollars of money to buy film with.
Gene, the problem with all these technologies is that you don't know when it'll suddenly, the curve will start going up fast. Kodak invented digital photography in '76. They didn't know which year people would suddenly stop buying film.
That's right.
Tablets have been around for years. We didn't know which year it would suddenly take off. I worked at Scion, who were in 1999 saying we've got to get out of the handheld device market because smartphones will take everything over. But none of these people, although they can see the future, they don't know at which point they will stop making profits. Kodak in particular didn't know which year they'd stop making profits on film.
Quite right.
And, well, yeah, okay, point made.
No, you're quite right. And I mean, you're right, tablets have been around for many years. And it really seems like what I'm trying to suggest is that the Apple iPads, the reason we focused on that one, is where that curve really started to shoot up like crazy. And the iPhone is really where, I mean, you've seen the performance of BlackBerry RIM stock recently? I mean, BlackBerries used to rule the world. And now it's really, but the key is the curve has gone up. Pavneet?
Just to follow up on Roderick, a couple of years ago I mentioned that AT&T, who invented mobile phone technology, had hired McKinsey to give an evaluation. McKinsey said exactly the same thing. You've got a monopoly on long distance. Get out of the mobile phone business. It's a niche market. So everything that's in our face right now is iOS. And it's the same sort of tunnel vision that we adopt. We don't know what the next hockey stick inflection point is going to be. And it's easy to say when DOS was around is if it doesn't run on DOS, don't bother with it. So Vladek's point is absolutely valid. We're looking back still, or we're looking at recent history. We're not looking at what the next inflection point might be, when Apple's revenues may take a turn, because for them it's a monopoly.
Well, I'm not praising Apple. I didn't say I've come to praise Apple. Apple to me is just the thing that's dragging everything else, it seems at the moment, up that curve really high.
Yeah,
tablets. I'm really more interested in tablets. Right. Apple or Android or anything else. I think that inflection point seems to have already happened.
Yes.
And Apple very well may take it on the chin at some point. Be a lot of people, of course, dancing and happy about that. I'm sure, not a problem. But I don't see tablets going that way. Jake, you've got something in your pocket that, if you haven't seen this, is almost the perfect size. To me, a 10-inch tablet is a bit tall to carry around.
It's a Samsung Galaxy Note. It's almost identical in size to the HP 30B. It seems like a big phone, but it also seems like an ordinary size calculator.
It is a little bit big. My impression is it's a little bit big for a phone, but I love that device because it's right at that point where not quite too big for a phone, but just big enough to also use as a tablet. And if you're running, who was it that had a 12C or a 15C on a phone yesterday that was the same size as the physical unit? Was it on that phone?
Yeah.
I mean, we had an 11C or a 12C or something on the phone. It was the same size. Much bigger than that, you've got a big thing to carry around. Much smaller than that, think the iPhone 4 or something. That's almost a little too tiny, but that's something in that 5 to 7 inch range may turn out to be that Star Trek tablet.
Hey, Gene, how many in this room remember Ron Johnson? Okay. Ron, if you know him, he's not easily swayed by emotion, what have you. He runs his own structural engineering company. He's self-employed, and when he evaluates something, he does it very seriously, very objectively. And he abandoned calculators long ago. In fact, he gave a presentation at one of our conferences last time we were in Chicago as to why he's no longer an HP calculator fan. About 2 weeks ago, he bought one, and I asked him what he thought of it. We carried on some correspondence, and then I sent around his simple, straightforward evaluation, and he was impressed.
I think he bought a Nexus 7.
Oh, Nexus 7, that's correct, that's correct. Similar. And he was going to Europe, and he bought it just because he was going to Europe, and he wanted to use it on this trip.
Was it a tablet? Or?
We are. Yeah, it's a Google
Tablet.
Made by HTC.
Now, I mean, a couple of last things here. To Volodic's point, I think the inflection point for tablet sales will be an inflection point coming back for handheld calculators. It's just not going to happen. To Pavneet's point, I don't care if it's Apple or Microsoft or Amazon, whoever it is, they're going to keep fighting or whatever, but I think the path is fairly clear. I don't see that suddenly topping off and people going to something. It's going to be some kind of a touch screen, whether it's a phone, a bigger phone, a small tablet, or a bigger tablet. There was also an article this week that for the first time ever, PCs, laptops, desktops, whatever, PCs were no longer the largest user of DRAM or memory chips. It's the first time it's ever happened in the history of the memory business. They're all being used in other devices, whether it's phones, tablets, embedded things, or whatever. That is an inflection point. It seems it's gone the other direction.
Actually, no, that's not true. It's not the first time. 1976 and before, the largest user of DRAM chips was not PCs.
I would say PCs and other wall, desktop, building-size computer. Sorry about that. You're right. PCs. So again, the thing we'd say here is HP is going to have a tough time, and it seems to us, competing with hardware. For them to stick with it, for them to do it right. I mean, they've tried once, and before they even had much of a chance, they rolled over, it seemed, and started crying for mommy. I mean, I cannot explain the apparent schizophrenia of what they did with the touchpad. That just seemed insane.
I think part of the problem is I like the technology aspect, and there are certain topics that some of the popular press, they go in and they analyze Apple. Every commentator has to analyze Apple because that's where all the action is. And for example, the topic that I was very impressed with was their RFI testing. They have got the most advanced facilities and high technology to do. Remember the antenna situation? It was a year ago, and so everybody was talking about that. It's their capability, because of the incredible sales that they have. They've invested in the capability, and that's what allows them to do what they can do. The numbers and what have you. HP, you would think that HP would have a similar capability, and that if the HP says we're going to make a tablet, that they can make a tablet. But now I wonder. I mean,
HP does have the largest and most capable consumer electronic testing laboratory in the world. So I can say that in terms of testing the longevity of laptops and computers and products and being able to test every aspect of that. They do have that huge capability. So I can speak up for them there. But yes, I do agree with the schizophrenia there. Nobody inside HP knew what was going on.
They don't have a Steve Jobs at HP.
No. Well, they don't have a Steve Jobs at Apple either.
Yeah, well.
I think he's in a back room, a very cold back room. So we're hoping and expecting that HP will continue periodically, at least, to make toys for us. But perhaps the future is really on things like the smartphones, the mini tablets, and the larger tablets from a software perspective. And once you play with them, the more and more you play with them, I think, Namir is kind of sold on these. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir right here on the front row. They get easier and easier to use, and perhaps we'll end up missing the things that we think are so important, click, click, click kind of stuff, and feedback for that, maybe a little less and less. I was going to take some time and show some of the emulators running on the iPad. You saw the screen. It's not going to work very well. What I'll do is just, if you want to see them, anybody here with an iPad, I bet, has multiple calculator emulators on it. We'll just move on into the next topic, and you can play with these whenever you want. So give them a try sometime. Any questions or thoughts other than Richard for the moment?
No, I think on your iPhone last night was 193 calculators on it.
In the Apple App Store, when you typed RPN, there were 193 RPN calculators of various sorts.
And they're all different. I mean,
and there's one guy that has a calculator construction kit, where you develop your own calculator. Was it Todd something or other, I think, is how it shows up?
Yeah.
He hasn't had a whole lot of them done. I couldn't figure out how to do it. But, I mean, very, very interesting. Yeah.
I'd like to comment, I believe, Tim, you had that e-ink calculator proposal one time. That sounds to me, in many ways, what we see in some of these smartphones, you could almost reverse it and say that's Tim's calculator with a telephone system added to it. So, and the beauty was to get away from the mechanical buttons.
The e-inks, I mean, you don't see any devices using them. The reason is it's not very good technology.
No, but
the only benefit it's got really is power. But
the concept.
Yeah, the concept of being
concept.
able to, for example, have different text on a button on a calculator.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have different language support. So
Yep.
when people use a different word for sign in their language,
Mm-hmm.
you know, being able to do that.
Yep.
We just can't do that right now with physical devices like that.
Well, I think with user mode where you define your own keyword, that would be great to be able to show what, right on the key, what function or program is assigned to that key. And even if you did a shift key and then it changed the text that was on there based on the shift key that was pressed, I mean, that all makes a lot of sense to me to go that way.
One of the HP48 emulators that runs on the phone or the iPads, when you press shift, it actually brings the shifted function larger on the key, and undo it, it goes back. It's already there on those. I'm really thinking the economics are not going to favor ever seeing that on a key per function physical device. Any thoughts or questions or anything?
I think, yeah, that ability to change what's displayed on the key is much more of a benefit than the lack of the tactile feedback. And the other thing is, I think, as you pointed out, the fact that kids in education, they're so used to charging cell phones every day, that they would do that with tablets. So the power problems, or the power advantages of a calculator go away. And also the kids, they're all going to have tablets in school pretty soon anyway. They're all ready. And I did a quick survey with a teacher friend of mine in a cafeteria one day with 5th graders. And we asked, who owns an iPod? Every single hand went up, every single one. We asked, who has a cell phone? And 98% of the hands went up. So, you know, the point I was making to her is the technology is in the kids' backpacks already. And all you got to do is say, we're going to standardize on this, and you're done.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if I've got this, the smartphone, why do I want to carry something else? It's got one use. When I've got 15 calculator emulators on here, if I really want them, on this one. Or if I happen to be carrying a cell phone and a tablet, again, why carry this extra one? I think that's the logic that's going to win out. In terms of tablet adoption, when my mother has an iPad, you know they're ubiquitous. And so if she has an iPad and uses it to play, she's not doing emulators for calculators, but if she has one of those, I mean, they're all over. And so I do think that's where it's going. That's why our theme is convergence. It's just reached the tipping point where I just don't see it going any other direction.
But I would say that I don't like the calculators for the calculator sense. It was the programmability that sold me on the calculators, and the fact that I could make it do something that it wasn't originally intended to do. And as the HP calculators added more capability like sound, not just numbers, and you could plug in interface modules, and you had controllability over it, that I don't see anybody doing that with the iPad. You know, the pads, all these people own these pads, but how many are actually doing anything that's remotely related to programming them?
Well, certainly if you're using calculators on them. I mean, the calculator emulators, many of them are programmable. And so just tap the little thing and then key in your program. If you've got, Eric, you're still with the 41CX simulator, but that has seemingly every module known to man that you can virtually plug into that. It is true on the Apple OS side of the house, it is tougher to develop your own stuff to put on there, as it is just to develop something for a PC in general compared to writing a small program. a calculator was, but Android's much more open, I believe, to developing your own stuff. But again, if you've got 100,000 apps, it may be that somebody else has already done what you're looking to do anyway. You know, I mean, they're crazy apps. Which months this year started on a Thursday? There's probably an app for that. Why, I don't know, but there probably is. So I think David, I think you've probably got it. You remember the logic we used to talk about with the students will never learn long division. You know, they're going to miss that joy that I had in the 3rd grade. Well, who was it? It was Bernard Oliver, wasn't it? Who said, you know, whenever there's a transition, something's gained and something's lost. And so with the tablets, the gain is having a huge number of additional exciting things you can do. The loss may, in fact, be, as you pointed out, the click and the touch feedback.
Well, it's like with fractions. It used to kill me. Do I divide the top number into the bottom number or the bottom number into the top number? And it's like,
They don't even know that.
that's,
Nope.
nope.
That's
You don't
why
even
we're
have
all still employed.
multiplication tables anymore.
I know.
But Richard, last night,
And how
I
are you
brought,
going to keep them from cheating other than passing a box around and taking up all the devices for the test?
you need some kind of dampening
Right,
feel.
they do.
It's on the Star Trek tablet. Richard and I were sitting at home with a 48 emulator on the iPad and went into Equation Writer and typed in some, you know, thing with an integral and all that kind of stuff. So boom, I mean, everything that we would want to do is in there. You have to pay for some of the apps, but somebody's going to develop an app, it seems like, for every HP. That's it for me. Any other questions we can...
Yeah, I'd like to make one more point. There is a fundamental difference in thinking, in attitude, in perspective of a calculator designer and a computer designer. Now, it may be kind of difficult to really put them in 2 separate boxes, but Tim, for example, is a calculator person. And there are certain characteristics, a certain perspective for people who are involved in solving problems. And there's an interface aspect in there. And that's what HP brings to the table. So I think those are good things. We talk about the hardware, but really what's behind it is an attitude, is a perspective, and of course that has to have the benefits to the user of speed, convenience, friendliness, all of those things that we often talk about. But that's what HP can bring to the table. But by the same token, the next technology, who knows what it can be? We can speculate, but the future right now is really just wide open.
I think it's a similar situation that's quite similar to the transition from this traditional slide rule to the electronic slide rule. When you were forced to operate a traditional slide rule, you had to have a lot of skills to really produce something. So when we had the tradition, the then traditional they were sorry that the skills were going away, and they couldn't imagine that you no longer need the skills for your work, because the electronic slide rules, the calculators, take much of the work you earlier had to think about yourself. Think about the magnitudes, for instance, when you calculated figures. You always had to figure out what magnitude of figures am I talking about. So this has been done with a calculator. And I think this transition we had at that time is similar to what we are experiencing now.
And I think the icue here is you have a tool, and the example I would give is, for those of us who've been around mechanical stuff years ago, we had a thing called a micrometer.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, you had to count the turns, and it took skill to even read what it is.
Yeah.
And then along came a vernier caliper. Now anybody could pick it up and measure. You didn't have to be a trained machinist to measure.
Yeah.
And that's what technology brings to the table. Anybody can do it. Anybody can take a digital photograph. Anybody, not a photographer, not an expert, anybody. And that's what, you know, opens it up, and that's what you have to be providing.
Well, what you mentioned about digital photography, however, it does not, having a digital camera does not make you a good photographer. It does, it's still a skill for a person to be able to compose a photograph, to know what is a good picture to take, what elements go together and so forth. So what we're doing is we're taking our skills from these calculators and moving them instead onto an emulator. It's just a matter of form versus function. Do you perpetuate the functionality while the form changes into the tablet form? Now, the difference is you don't have physical buttons that you push, but instead you have a touch screen that you interact with. But what we bring is the ability and the knowledge of how to program these sorts of devices and how to write things that are useful to other people. So that's the skill we need to perpetuate rather than worrying about the form. The form is nostalgic and lovely, and the fact that we can go back and limit ourselves for perhaps to what an HP 41 provided years ago. We're actually putting ourselves in restraint underneath a set of, or constraints, should I say. We're dealing with a limited set of functionality. Now we have all functionality of the entire internet, the world. We can reach out and touch anything in the world pretty much that is on the internet through those devices. So we're taking a form and updating it now. New functionality, but we need to bring with us our abilities.
Peter?
There's one thing you were mentioning. You get a GPS, a cell phone, your tablet, everything in one package. I think the interesting thing is, I don't know what the answer would be, is how much of the niche market can we afford to do without, in the sense that if I'm out in the middle of nowhere and my cell phone goes out, I still have a GPS if I have a Garmin and my Samsung. Or if my cell phone my GPS goes out, I can still squall for help.
Sure.
But if both of them on one package.
But again, it's the whole idea of, or how many HPs do you really carry with you when you're out in the field?
Right.
You can have 4 or 5. What if all 5 die? I mean, you're right.
But
look at the pricing. Look at the pricing of GPSs. They have tanked. And there's a big reason for that. I mean, well, a few years ago, everybody had to have one of those. Well, now, I can look on my phone and figure out exactly where I need to go as long as the Apple Map program's working. But David, you had it next.
Well, as you pointed out, we have functional emulators for all of the old and most of the new HP calculators. I don't think you mentioned it, but the emulators generally are much, much faster than the originals. But the thing is, if I'm a high school student and I need a calculator and I've never heard of any of these old HP things, I mean, I haven't looked for any of these. Are there any advanced calculator programs available on these devices that aren't emulators of older existing machines?
They're limited, they're fewer, but you're right.
Well, when we were looking for RPN, most of them were not the traditional old HPs. There were ones that people had did. One of them I loved looked like a Voyager type series, but essentially it was a 4-function with some memory. Took up the whole screen. Nice big buttons if you're doing adding machine stuff. There are, of course, algebraic calculators out the wazoo, things like that. So, I mean, if a student's needing one, they may not go and find an HP29C emulator, but they'll be using some sort of a calculator program or emulator on a tablet or a phone or a touch. One last thing I thought of was what? It's figures now. Wait. Recall L. No, it didn't work. I'll think of it and make a comment, snide comment from the corner sometime.
Gene?
Yes, Matt.
I learned, in the 70s, you're learning math in school, you're at home and you're doing your homework. We didn't have these phones and these tablets, but my kids now, they're in high school now, but when they were in middle school, here she's asking for help, and I'm trying to teach her, at the kitchen table, and these texts come in, and then when she's not getting a text, she's got the headphones in, and I'm just wondering about those core foundational skills. I hope when she's my age, if she teaches her kids, is she going to know how to do that? Because, I mean, I don't know how you concentrate with all these distractions.
Well,
coming in.
you don't concentrate, and the attention
Yeah,
span's
that's-
getting shorter and
that's what
shorter
my
and shorter.
point is.
It used to be, I read somewhere in the old TV shows there would be like 10 scene transitions or whatever in a show, and now there's like 50. Because we don't, if we're staring at the same thing all this time, it's like this is boring after 10 seconds. And that's just the way it is. But just try them. I remember what it is now. I will buy, if there happens to ever be some sort of a, I don't know, do-it-yourself calculator ever comes out sometime in the future. I'm sure I will buy one of them, but I'm just not sure it's going to sell 1 million units either.
How about 100 million?
No. So I mean, I want them. Don't get me wrong. I don't want the calculators to die, but I think the edge of the cliff is in sight. Seems to me.
I wonder sometimes if we're not transitioning from his comment, I wonder with all the connectivity if we're not transitioning from an individual mentality to a hive mentality among people, because you've got everyone connected to everyone else, and if you're disconnected, I notice these days with kids, if they're disconnected from their electronics for a short period of time, they experience a sort of a withdrawal, a sense of true aloneness. You know, what, oh my gosh, I can't contact anyone or my friends or whatever.
That's how we used to discipline our son. Send him to his room and
With no
disconnect
electronics. I mean, it used to be when I would drive, it wasn't that long ago when I was driving around town, my wife couldn't find me. If she needed something, she couldn't get a hold of me. You know,
electronically.
Now, I mean,
Why do I pay for Peter's?
everywhere I go, right? It's like we're all in touch. It seems all the time with this stuff. The battery can go dead, quite right.
It's a tracking device.
But all those charging things that are needed for these tablets and phones, that's another good reason why a company I happen to work for makes a lot of power products. Because everybody seems 2 or 3. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we're having no difficulty staying on schedule, and that's a good thing, because